Good morning to our listeners here on Long Island's most listened to radio, Walk 97.5. My name is Dan Levler, president of Suffolk AME, Suffolk County's largest independent public sector union. It's our pleasure to welcome you again to our show, Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. Our show will air every Sunday from 7:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. right here on Walk 97.5. So grab a cup of coffee at home or turn up the radio in your car as we bring you the news and views you won't hear anywhere else. So just to recap you on the past few weeks, we've been spending some time discussing the impact of the Janus case on public sector unions and what that means for people in New York and specifically here in Suffolk County and the implications across the country. This morning we're going to break away from that a little bit and just discuss some of the departments within Suffolk County and the services they provide, and specifically we'll spend some time on the medical examiner's office. We'll be joined by someone from the medical examiner's office in a little bit. And again, our goal is simple. With this new weekly show, we hope to share our insights on pressing issues facing Suffolk residents from the perspective of working men and women who often go underrepresented, yet perform the essential services that every Suffolk County resident depends on. We hope to offer balanced opinions and welcome the views of those who disagree with our positions. In this day and age, we can't wait for something to happen. We have to make it happen. So each week we'll seek to enlighten our listeners about the issues and how they impact their lives. When we come back from this break, we'll be speaking with Ann Weber from the medical examiner's office. And welcome back this morning to Suffolk Matters. I'm joined by Ann Weber. Ann is an employee of the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's Office and an AME member. Ann, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So I'd love to speak to you a bit about your job, the myths and facts surrounding it and the overall sense you get from doing this work. But first and foremost, let's start with education. What kind of education background do you have?
Well, all of our investigators are all licensed PAs or physician assistants. Some of us also have masters, and I also have a doctorate.
So should I be calling you Dr. Weber?
You don't need to.
You don't need to, but I can. I appreciate it. So, now most people are aware of crime shows that depict the job of someone in your position. I'd imagine the reality of your job has some departure from the TV magic, and that the real emotional impact of your work is very present and not easily wrapped up in a half hour. How do you cope with the work you do?
We live in a CSI world now where everyone thinks that everything that they see on TV is exactly how it's done, and there are a lot of differences. For one, I'm not really out there in white pants and high heels flipping my hair at every scene and sticking my fingers in blood. And there's a very scientific approach to every death investigation, and it's really not just done by me. So we have a team of scientific experts that approach and handle every death investigation. So you have a forensic investigator like myself. You also have uniformed police officers responding to a team. If it's a homicide or a potential homicide, you will also have detectives or homicide detectives and crime scene experts and forensic scientists, even from our crime lab. So there are a lot of different people that may be looking at evidence. And we also have another aspect of it that makes it very human. And on TV, you may see a lot of people responding to death investigation scenes and just acting as though this is just another case or another death, and not really seeing the human aspect of it and how it takes its toll on you. And when you pry a lifeless child or baby out of a mother's arms just once, you'll never, ever be the same again. And you take those cases home with you.
Yeah, I would imagine, for sure. And that's, I think, the human side that the TV shows miss. You're dealing with tragedy.
Right.
every day. There isn't a time that you go out where it's going to be good news for somebody. It's always bad, and like you say, you have a team of people that you're working with across multiple departments, but everybody is their sense of compassion, that they're touched on every scene they go to. So, how many medical examiners work a shift in Suffolk County?
Well, we, during the daytime, have 7 pathologists that are actually doing autopsies in the morgue. They may not be cutting all at the same time, but we have 3 autopsy tables working oftentimes at the same time. And then we have the rest of the pathologists working in-house on older cases or taking information on new cases. The investigations unit, on the other hand, is staffed 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and we're covering about 2,300 square miles of Suffolk County. That includes the water. Many times there's only one investigator working, covering
Wow.
the entire county. We try to staff it at nighttime with at least 2 people, but many of us have seniority, and the only thing that we can be guaranteed, really, is our time off, and we need to take that time. So taking that time, of course, leaves the shift short. And in the daytime, we try to have the office staffed by at least 2. We like to have 3 investigators working.
I would certainly think so, and I would imagine there's certain times in the year where you're going to see upticks. I think of, 4th of July just recently
Right.
passed. Maybe Halloween. Very unfortunately, sometimes around the holidays you'll see an uptick.
Yeah, we seem to have a lot of suicides as we get closer to the holidays at the end of the year. And then once the summer approaches, or the spring even, we see an increase in motor vehicle accidents. And, of course, we live in an island, so you'd expect to see drownings and things like that. But I think what keeps us the busiest right now is the amount of overdoses that we see, and we see them daily. Unfortunately, drugs are a very big problem in Suffolk County.
Yeah, and we hear a lot about it. We see it in the newspapers, and we know that there are initiatives in Suffolk County to try and defray this as much as possible. I would imagine, and I hate to say it because I know you go through this, but we're not just talking about people that you would understand, but people that maybe you wouldn't understand overdosing, younger kids.
Every single district sees overdoses. And unfortunately, there are still a lot of parents from affluent areas that think, not my kid. Oh, yes, your kid and your kid's friends. And we see it every single day.
And again, it's not necessarily the stuff that's on the streets. It could be the stuff
in
the
their
medicine
own cabinet.
Yep.
Right.
And that's the problem. And essentially, if my understanding is correct, sometimes people get into this, maybe chasing a good feeling, get themselves hooked, and then they
Right.
continue to chase the good feeling. But at a certain point in time, when you take enough of this substance, regardless of how you feel, it starts to shut you down.
Yeah, well, they keep chasing that initial high. Oftentimes with these kids, they start with pills, and then when they can no longer get them, they start looking for them on the street. And then they're a little too expensive for them to buy on the street. And then they turn to heroin, which is obviously a less expensive option to have that same type of opiate high. And they keep chasing that initial high that they get, and you'll never, ever achieve that high again. So they keep using more and more
Right.
of the drug that they're buying, and it's never pure anyway. It's cut with
Who knows what?
garbage.
Who knows what? Again, it's not being produced in a laboratory somewhere.
Right.
It's probably being mixed up in somebody's warehouse, or
Right.
you don't even know. Yeah, I think that's very heartbreaking, and especially, like I said earlier, the ones you don't necessarily see coming, where people didn't know there was a problem.
Right.
I guess that's the insidious nature of this particular drug, is that it can touch any class of person, let's call it, and any age group, and it really just doesn't discriminate. And I believe that the heartbreak that you guys have to be around is very real. Oftentimes, everybody, I guess, probably, going back to the whole TV show thing, they have this mental image of what a junkie, quote unquote, would look like and how they would be.
It's not how they look anymore.
It's not the case.
It's professionals where I'm looking between the toes and the groin of professionals now, because they don't want to shoot up in their arms where people are going to see it when they go to work. So you see it in professionals and then again in children. So, yeah, you're seeing it in moms. And the other issue is, of course, underage drinking. That's becoming a little bit more prevalent in our society as well. And
that's another thing, I guess. It was kind of news to me. I had sat in a legislative meeting in Suffolk County, and apparently, it certainly was news to me. Rather than kids getting caught with alcohol in their breath, they're trying other methods, trying to put alcohol on their eye, and other things. I guess we probably shouldn't get into, but they're getting creative to get themselves out of trouble.
Yes, people are putting drugs in their eyes. They're putting drugs in their vagina.
That's a rough one.
Sticking patches in their rectum, wherever the blood supply is great.
Right.
You will get the drugs into your system a little bit faster.
So that, essentially that changes the complexity of your job, because sometimes it's not readily apparent. And as you alluded to before, you've got to check between toes and other areas just simply to figure out, what had gone on.
How the drugs got into their system,
Sure.
if you're suspicious of it being drugs.
Sure. So what specifically do you think people might not know about the medical examiners? Your job or any of the jobs in your building that you think might, it might be missed. Again, like we talk about these CSI type shows, and they kind of gloss over things, put people in high heels and have them flipping their hair and acting like nothing's going on.
I could go on for days about that. People oftentimes forget that we are human and we have our own families. And to deal with some of these very, very difficult issues and then still have to go back to your life and try to not think about it. You try to leave as much of it behind, because if you bring everything home with you, you may not make it till morning. But sometimes people just forget that we are feeling humans too. And sometimes when we tell families that they can't see their loved one, it's not because we want to make it more difficult on them, but because we're either trying to preserve evidence or we're recognizing how difficult it would be for them to see their loved one in the condition that they're in. How do you tell a family member that their mother, daughter, husband, son is decomposing? How do you tell them that? They're not viewable.
There's no good way to answer that question, right?
But we have to still get through that, and we still have to try and identify them. And it's not always going to be as easy as looking at someone and identifying them visually. So we have to find other more scientific ways to identify people.
So I would certainly say, to your point, something that I've definitely noticed is there seems to be a disconnect between the public and the public employee. You become part of an institution, you become a thing, a function of government, and you're not seen as a human being. We see this across all job titles,
right.
Working in Suffolk County that I know of directly, and I'm sure the same thing happens on the state and the federal level as well. And so I think that's an excellent point. Everybody that you're working with is a thinking, feeling member of society, no different than your friends, your neighbors, your family. We've answered the call to public service, and some of us have jobs that put us in harm's way, like yours does.
Right.
The emotional toll that this job takes, I would imagine, not just on you and the rest of the guys that do your specific job, but what it does to everyone inside the medical examiners every day, that's a lot to ask for. And again, to do that with the staffing levels the way you had just described and talking about, at certain points in time, you need a break. You need to be able to mentally just unwind and step away, and you've earned some time off from work. But if you take that time off from work, you know that you're leaving one person to cover all of Suffolk County, maybe on a night shift, and maybe during a point in time of the year where more than one thing is going to happen. So, my hat's certainly off to you and all the people that work at the medical examiners.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for all that you do for us, because we have, unfortunately, for so many years been the unsung heroes in a lot of these situations where you oftentimes hear about the police department and the fire department and those members who are, yes, running around saving lives and running into burning buildings to get people out. But we also hear about how sad it is for them to have to deal with these situations, and you never really hear anybody talk about how the medical examiner staff, our drivers included, have to go into these homes or these areas and collect the bodies of these people and then deal with the grieving families, which oftentimes is even more difficult than dealing with the body.
When you say these areas, it's every area. Again, I just don't want to give our listeners the wrong impression that we're talking about certain neighborhoods. This is happening everywhere.
Well, drugs in particular happening
regardless
everywhere.
Regardless of the issue, but I mean, car
drownings,
accidents happen.
Suicides.
Yeah, suicides, crimes of passion. You guys deal with and see it all. And if not for you doing your job, justice wouldn't be served in a lot of instances. So, I don't take anything away from the guys who get their name in the newspaper. But I think the people in Suffolk County, the taxpayer in Suffolk County, certainly is aware now that there's more to this story than just a handful of guys they read about in the paper.
Right.
There is a whole world of people working behind the scenes to make sure that everything goes right in Suffolk County, and some, such as yourself, are on the front line of dealing with some of the most human tragedies.
All right. Thank you.
So, what would you say has changed most about your job over the past few years?
Well, we have more women. When I first started 20 years ago, I was the only woman there, and I got the impression that my male counterparts didn't really want women working there for a garden variety of reasons. But we're now half women, and I think that although, again, we do live in a CSI world where they've glamorized this profession, because of that, I think that it's attracted a lot of women, smart women, educated women, into this profession, and we just bring a different skill set to the table. I think that we have a more compassionate approach, I think, to the families, and I'm not trying to take anything away from my male counterparts, but...
No. But it's certainly been documented the ability to deal with emotions and the emotional range is probably an asset to the field that you're in.
I think so.
So why do you think being a medical examiner is a good career? And I know we've talked a lot about the tragedy of it. So I know I'm putting you a little bit on the spot. And again, altruism aside, or maybe not aside.
I think women by nature have a tendency to be nosy, and that oftentimes makes us good investigators. We get to see a different side of humanity, and we do get to, although we're stepping away from clinical medicine, we get to use our empathy skills that we would normally give towards the patient to the family and helping them deal with grief. I don't think it is for everyone, but it takes a unique person who has a comforting approach and a real desire to get the answers when they're not obvious.
So, Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Kaplan, and I've had some opportunity to speak with him. Again, exceedingly bright, very compassionate, very gracious. Every time I've dealt with him, he has always taken the time to take in all sides of an issue and make sure that everybody's heard and represented, and that he gets to the heart of things. But you work with him probably, well, certainly more closely than I do, and I'd love to get your take on how he kind of runs a medical examiner's office.
Dr. Kaplan has been a breath of fresh air to our office for the last 4 years. He came at a time when we really needed someone to step in and bring up employee morale. He is a genuinely nice man. He's a gentleman, and he's very bright. He's an incredible teacher and an incredible mentor, and I think that he has given us a lot, and the county's administration seems to like him very much. And he isn't afraid to pick up the phone and call a family. He isn't afraid to explain to a family that he hasn't yet come up with the answer on why their child maybe died. And it's a very difficult thing to tell a family, to tell a parent that I don't have the answer yet. And if it looks like an overdose, but it's not, where do you go from there? There's a lot more to the death investigation, and he explains all of that to them without fear of how they may react to him not having the answer.
But not callous. He's never been callous. He has
Very
always
sweet.
been very much aware of the situation he's in and the people around him. It's certainly a testament to what a commissioner could be. Someone running a department can and should be. It's been my pleasure working with him. I'm sure, as you've just said, the entire department benefits from having him around and running things the way he does.
He's a gentleman.
Certainly. I mentioned earlier you're an AME member.
Proud member.
From my perspective, I guess I kind of know what I think that means. But I think it's very personal and different for each person that chooses to be part of a larger collective that bands together for everyone's benefit. And I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit on what being an AME member means to you.
I'm a proud AME member today. I can honestly say that I was a proud member years ago, but our executive board is truly working for the members now, and I'm proud to say that we will work together for a long time together. Amy is a union who represents, as they say, the brooms to the doctors. I think that there's a lot in between, and we kind of got lost over the years being somewhere in between. And I think that AME is not only protecting our rights, but is really looking out for us and looking to make our environment, our work environment, and our future better for us. And I think that all AMEs will benefit from AME now.
I certainly appreciate the vote of confidence, and that we've certainly worked very hard to turn around the way things were done and the way we were perceived in the world. And, in no small part thanks to people like yourself, not only being the quality employee you are for Suffolk County and doing that very difficult job, but also being so involved in your community. I can remember over the past few years going to a few different award ceremonies where other people had recognized the great things that you have done for, over and above just just your day-to-day job, the things you do for the community. Can you think of an example of anyone you work with that maybe did something above and beyond and in some way exceeded what the normal day-to-day duties would be?
Yes, one of my partners comes to mind immediately, Brian Bobrowski, who he located and stopped to assist someone who had overdosed on heroin. And his girlfriend was driving the vehicle. He located the vehicle and alerted police highway unit to where they were and was able to administer Narcan and save that man's life. And it's not really part of our day-to-day responsibilities of the medical examiner's office to save lives, but as a licensed clinician who was able to administer medication and knew how to do it. I had just completed a Narcan training at my office and distributed Narcan kits to everyone, and he was recently awarded for that.
That's great. And that's, I think that exemplifies what an AME member is. That's something that you get over and above what you think you're getting from the public employees that our listeners' taxpayer dollars are going towards. So I'll just take a quick minute to recap. We've been speaking with Dr. Ann Weber, although we don't have to call her doctor. She is from the medical examiner's office, and we had just been speaking about some of the differences between the myth that you'll see on TV shows and sometimes in the movies, or maybe oftentimes in the movies, and the realities of the day-to-day job, the human element that you don't see and understand, and the team of people that go into action every time there's a death in Suffolk County. And I want to thank Ann very much for being with us today and helping us out and getting this information to all our listeners. Thanks again, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
And join us next week at 7:30 a.m. on Walk 97.5.